Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I do hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to today's upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter and they are appreciated. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? I'd been working as a park ranger at Little Buffalo State Park in central PA for about 6 months when I had my encounter. It was August of 2006. My partner and I were driving around the park at night to do a final check of the area for the evening. We were about halfway through our section of the park when we got a call from dispatch saying that there had been a camper who wanted us to come out and take a look around his RV, because he had thought it had been vandalized or possibly broken into. We told dispatch that we'd be there shortly. We turned the vehicle around and arrived at his campsite within 5 minutes or so. When we got there, we found a gentleman in his mid-60s standing outside of his RV looking nervous. He walked up to the truck, and I asked him if we could take a look at his camper. His behavior was unusual. So he cautiously agreed and walked over to the camper with us, following closely behind. He was very nervous and kept looking around the entire time, almost like he was expecting something to jump out of the woodline. We took a quick look inside of the camper and found nothing that appeared to be out of place or missing. I asked him if anything had been taken from inside, and he said no, but there were some things that he thought were moved around during the short time he had been gone. I looked around for another minute or so before telling him that we didn't see anything wrong. If he had any other issues, to give us a call. Thanked him for calling us, and we started walking back to the truck. That's when my partner, an avid hunter, asked me, "Do you smell that?" I stopped walking for a second because honestly I didn't notice any kind of odor other than the normal smell of a state park. Mildew, pine needles, etc. My partner has spent many hours in the woods, so he knows his smells. He told me that he smelled something that was trying to cover up its own scent. And now that he said that, that's when I noticed it. It was a very light odor, but definitely there. We looked around for another minute or so before my partner said, "I think we need to get out of here." We got into our truck and drove toward the main area of the park, which was about a mile away from where we were at the campsite. We navigated our way up the path, and as soon as we got onto the main road that travels through the park, we both saw it. It looked to be 7.5 feet tall walking along the road. I was driving, so I didn't get the best look at it, but my partner saw it walk into the road and in front of us. It then quickly crossed to the other side, where there is more vegetation and trees. He said that he could see the backside as it walked across the road with very wide shoulders, almost too wide for its body. He also said that he thought he could see long black hair covering its arms and shoulders, but he wasn't sure because it was dark. We drove around looking for this thing for about another hour. We had no luck finding anything else unusual, so we eventually gave up and returned back to the office. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I went back to the site myself in hopes of finding any evidence of what we saw or smelled that night. but I found nothing out of place or anything unusual in any way. I decided to just move on and not focus on it since no concrete evidence could be found. I've heard other encounters in this area as well, which makes me believe that something is going on out here for sure. Also, there have been sightings reported in this area all the way over to Harrisburg. Anyway, that's my experience. I'm not here to convince anybody that what I saw was real, but I know that what I saw and smelled was real. Also, there have been several reports of dead deer in the area, deer that are torn apart and not consumed. Now, that's very unusual to say the least, so I'm wondering if it is connected somehow. The most common theory among hunters around here is something is killing the deer just for sport, and then covering up its tracks or scent with another odor to mask its own. I can't quite figure out how that would work, but that's what some people are thinking. In the end, I am not sure exactly what is going on. So just my 2 cents on that experience. Throughout the years of researching and looking into these accounts, Bigfoot usually takes the carcass with them. More commonly, an animal or a cryptid known for hunting for sport would be a Dogman. Not recently, but it seems more and more that these accounts of these shimmering like creatures, almost like the predator, are being seen in these wooded areas. And they are not new. There are experiences dating back to the 60s of creatures like this. There is even a couple at Skinwalker Ranch. What I think is strange is the covering of the scent. Would they kill the deer for fun? And then possibly like take out the musk glands or whatever they're called and use that to cover up their own foul smell? I don't know. It's just a little theory that I thought of when I read this the other day and wanted to share it with you guys. So let's get into today's second encounter. Today's second encounter is, I wanted to share this one because it is almost a straight line west of where the first encounter took place. Hours away, 3 hours away. But I looked it up and I was like, I wonder how far these two areas are apart, because obviously I talked about putting my map together and such. And it is almost a straight line going from east to west, 3 hours apart by car if traveling through woods and whatnot. Probably less for one of these creatures. I just thought it was interesting. I'm writing this for a friend, so this is a secondhand account. He now wears a bulletproof vest and carries a gun every day because of this. He said that there are 8-foot-tall creatures resembling reptilian-type beings surrounding his home at night. They get into his head and communicate strange things like the end of civilization and that only a small group of humans will survive. Sometimes they get physical, and then there is a loss of consciousness. They mimic his voice when he yells out into the woods at them. It starts off sounding strange, and they repeat it over and over until they get it exactly duplicated, until it gives him the chills and goosebumps. He shoots at them, and then a light smacks the bullets out of the air. When the light hits the bullet, it makes a loud slapping noise. He finds the bullet in the yard in the morning. Some of them are perfectly shaped, and some are flat, like they had been hit by a train. Since the guns and bullets did not work, he has tried using a knife. He was able to stab one, and it yelled. He used a bear trap once. It snapped shut, and the thing screamed. The trap was gone in the morning. There is so much more to his experiences that I don't know and cannot remember, but he would like to share this. They don't seem to be able to come into his house for some reason. Humans might be working with them as well. At the same time that these incidents are taking place, someone shot his dog. The dog was placed in a box and left on his front door of his house with a note, "Don't forget." It sounds sort of like the Mothman prophecy stuff to me. Strange. The only way he sees himself actually being able to kill one of these creatures is by stabbing it while it is dragging him away, and hopefully it bleeds out before it takes him where it wants to go. Like I said, there is so much more to his experiences that only he knows. He wants to find out how to get rid of these creatures. This was submitted to MUFON. Today's third experience, this Dogman encounter is... Actually, it's multiple experiences, and this gentleman actually took a lot of time to document it. Almost like the gentleman that had multiple experiences with crawlers throughout the years of his life, and he documented them all. This is well documented, and I'm looking forward to sharing this with you all. Just so that you have an idea of my background, knowledge, and experience, I grew up all over the rural southern U.S., from Appalachian Mountains to the swamps, backwoods, and bayous of the Deep South, where I spent most of my free time deep in the woods up until my early 20s. I spent most of my time hiking, camping, hunting, fishing, and have always felt at home and at peace miles from nowhere. The more remote, the better. I'm well educated. I have a degree in a field of science and have seen various types of wildlife, coyote, wolves, panthers, and bears in the wild. When I was 17, my family moved to the Florida Panhandle. The woods in that area and around the house went on for miles and are only interrupted by the occasional creek, river, country road, or farm. There really are many miles of woods that see very little traffic out there. I was told by the locals that the area around the house had a special significance to the Native American, and on a few occasions people alluded to things being odd in the area, but no one ever told me anything specific. If anything, the few who seemed to know anything got weird and quiet if I pressed them about why they made the remarks about the woods. So I dismissed it and lived my outdoor life as I normally would. On one occasion, some friends came over to our property. We decided to go camping. We went down by one of the creek bottoms a mile behind the house to hang out for a while, but after remembering all of the water moccasins that hung out down there, I decided against camping out there out of concern that someone may get bit by a snake in the dark. There were lots of cottonmouths down there, and they are more active at night. So around dusk, myself and another kid went back to the house, and the other two were still going to camp there for the night. Probably an hour after dark, the other two showed up looking shaken. They said that they were going to go to sleep inside as well. They seemed spooked, but when I asked them if something was wrong, they got weird and clammed up. The next day, we went back to the creek bottom to goof around and do the teenage stuff. One of my friends had brought a rifle, which he seemed eager to try out. It was one of those old Chinese SKSs. We were messing around the campsite they had abandoned the night before when one of them commented on seeing something that looked like an invisible thing from the movie The Predator. I thought they were being silly, but they insisted. So we went and looked and saw nothing. A little while later, the friend with the rifle fired a shot into the trees, which was immediately followed by a huge splash into the creek. When I looked at the creek, I saw large waves from the impact, like someone had thrown something very large into it with a lot of force. For a fraction of a second, I thought I saw something brown and blurry in the creek, but Before my eyes could even focus on it, nothing was there to be seen, yet there were waves still moving. It was very strange. I was surprised. I didn't know that he intended to shoot at anything, and had been looking the other way. My other friends didn't seem to know what had happened either. We asked him what happened, what he saw. I saw a large, hairy thing up there on a large limb in the tree and shot it. I know that was absolutely irresponsible of him. I asked him what he just shot. Was it a raccoon or something? No, he said. It looked like something straight out of a zoo, kind of like a big monkey or something, but it had the face that was looking at me. I must have hit it because it fell into the creek. All of this happened in less than a minute, and we ran the 20 feet over to the creek, where Will had heard the splash. There was still a slight disturbance in the water, but we never saw a thing. When I questioned the friend, he reiterated what he saw, a hairy thing that reminded him of something similar to a baboon looking at him from atop of a large limb in the tree, but he repeated, it had a face, and it was looking at him. I asked him, what do you mean it had a face? Like a human face? No, it wasn't human, but it didn't look like any animal face I had ever seen. It didn't look like a monkey's face either. It was just different. We searched the banks and looked around, but didn't find anything. We even walked down the creek a good ways to see if he had killed something, and maybe it floated down the stream. We never found anything, no blood, no tracks, no fur. But whatever had happened, he had irresponsibly shot at something, and even if out of surprise it had fallen into the creek, but we never found any sign of it. It was shortly after this that things started feeling weird, a little eerie, and we called it a day. I never knew what to think of that event, and I think I had written it off as something that either just didn't make sense or some kind of crazy, very successful prank. I even asked the other two guys if they were screwing with me, and they swore that they had no idea what was going on and had done nothing. One of them did see him fire the rifle, but didn't know what he was shooting at. He said he saw something fall in his peripheral vision, but when he looked into the creek, there was nothing there. Life continued on as normal, and I spent a lot of my free time hiking, exploring, and looking for fishing holes off of the small creek. At some point after this, I started having weird experiences in the woods periodically. Sometimes, usually late in the day or at dusk, I would get that feeling like I was being watched. The feeling wasn't there most of the time. It would just happen on occasion. I started noticing that sometimes in the evening, I would hear strange animal noises from the surrounding woods. A few times it sounded like blood-curdling screams. Once it sounded like a roar. And a few times it sounded like some kind of odd bird-like cry, similar to that of a peacock. Being familiar with animals, I always tried to deduce what animal was making the noise. I concluded that the screams must have been a panther, the roar possibly a bear, but the peacock noises made no sense. There were 3 neighbors within 1.5 miles on that isolated road, and none of them had a peacock. Then, late one evening, I heard more intimidating scream than before. It just sounded bizarre and caused a sense of fear and dread. The scream sounded like a woman being murdered. I don't know how else to describe it. It was high-pitched, shrill, and loud, but it sounded too loud and lasted too long to be a human. I figured it must have been a panther, but it didn't feel right and sent chills down my spine. It was during the last bit of twilight before total darkness, and I hurried my ass back to the house. Sometime after that occasional sense of being watched and followed began to feel stronger and more malevolent. On a couple occasions after that, when I was out in the woods, I felt that I was not being watched, but I was being hunted, and that my life was in danger. I never saw or heard anything. The woods were always silent when this happened, and I always quickly made my way home, but made it a point to walk as if I felt running may trigger that predator like panther to chase me. Whatever it was, I felt like I was in imminent danger or death. It was a consuming feeling like nothing I had ever felt. One day, during this time, my little brother and his friends came running excitedly up to me and told me that they had seen a bear. Being that this area had been heavily hunted for many years, and there are not supposed to be any bears anywhere near this part of Florida, I asked them what they saw. They said they had turned around to see the hind end of something on all fours walking into the edge of the forest. They only saw the very end of the creature and could only see the upper part of its hind legs and its back right above the legs. They said that it was brown and had hair, and it was much bigger than a dog, so it must have been a bear. Again, there are no bear known to exist anywhere near here. At some point after this, I was out hiking again one day and had made it a point to bring my shotgun loaded with number 4 shot, which is the largest pellets that I had. I had begun carrying it when hiking as a precaution to whatever was out there. I was still leaning toward it being a panther. I didn't know what else it could have been that would stalk a human and go undetected. I had noticed that the strange feelings had various strange sounds seemed to happen around dusk or at night, so I started making it a point to be home well before dark. This time I had stayed out a little too late. Dusk was beginning as I made my way home when I felt it again. Something was watching me. No, it felt like something was after me. The level of fear and the senses that this thing triggered was completely different than anything I had ever felt. I knew I was being stalked, but I could not see or hear anything as I made my way home. Whatever the thing was, it seemed to move with me as I had walked hundreds of yards, but the feeling only grew stronger. I felt like my life was in peril, like something was about to lunge out and kill me. Every hair on my body seemed to stand up on end, and I felt certain that whatever it was, a shotgun was not going to stop it. Despite the terror I was feeling, I forced myself to stop and scan the woods, looking at both the ground and up into the trees, thinking I may see a panther nearby readying to pounce on me. There was nothing that I could see nor hear. Everything was deathly quiet. It was about that time that I first remembered an inner voice saying something like, "Don't stop, go quick, don't run." I started praying as I walked to the house. Every fiber of my being, I felt the sense of malice and intent. Whatever it was, it wanted to kill me. I felt sheer terror, sheer dread in the way I had never felt in 17 years of my life. I remember I grew up in very rural areas full of remote, isolated spots. Those places were where I felt the most at peace. Animals didn't scare me, but whatever this was, it did. That feeling was terrifying and consuming. It was all that I could do to walk home clutching the useless shotgun, praying to God to protect me. And he did. Usually when I got home within 200 to 300 yards of the house, the feeling would subside. This time the feeling followed me right up to about 50 yards from my house. I continued praying, and as I reached it, that feeling eased off, but I felt like whatever it was nearby watching. From that day on, I started occasionally feeling a malevolent presence emanating from the nearby woods. Sometimes it didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe in my own yard at night. I remember one time when I walked into the backyard, I heard a scream again. It sounded like a woman screaming in terror, only extremely loud, and it lasted far too long to be a human. And then it transitioned into something like a baby crying. But the crying changed to become distorted and twisted, and it just felt and sounded like something was wicked and trying to frighten me. From that point on, I avoided the woods, especially when alone or in the evening. I turned to partying and tried to push the events from my mind. A year or two had passed without incident, and I had gotten too relaxed. Sometimes I get the occasional itch to go for a stroll at night. The moon was mostly full. The sky was clear with lots of stars. It was bright, beautiful autumn. I still had enough apprehension to stay out of the fields and woods, especially alone at night, so I decided to go for a walk down the rural road. It was probably around midnight. I had walked several hundred yards down the road and cut across the corner of someone's cow pasture to get to the other dirt road. I had gone through an electric fence and made it about 50 yards through the pasture when I heard something moving in the adjacent cornfield on the opposite side of the dirt road from the pasture. I stopped and listened and heard the sound of something big moving quickly through the corn rows. At first I thought maybe it's a deer until I realized that the steps and movements sounded bipedal and large. Several times it moved and then paused, then moved through the corn quickly again. After hearing the movement several times, suddenly the sound of movement was followed by the sound of a rabbit squealing. I instinctively crouched, peering into the darkness. Up until this moment, I had only been curious as to what kind of animal I had gotten close to. I had no way of fathoming what was about to step out. What I saw was a large bipedal figure walk out of the cornfield. It crossed the dirt road, stepped over the electric fence in mid-stride without pause or effort. In the bright light of the moon and stars, I could make out some details. Its head had a significant wolf-like feature, long snout and pointed ears. It was taller than a human, maybe 7 feet, possibly a little more. And it walked, leaning forward with its shoulders hunched forward like it was slightly crouched. It was covered in fur, but the fur seemed thinner and shorter on much of its torso and arms. I remember noticing it had very lean but powerful build. Its arms seemed unusually long and hung low as it moved, and it had clutched something in one of what appeared to be its hands. I couldn't make out its color because of the limited light, but it was definitely dark colored. I never noticed the tail or whatever, but it did have doubled knees. These creatures are often portrayed having. Despite being a semi-bright night, a lot of its body from the waist down was obscured in shadows. It crouched on the ground, clutching the rabbit in both hands, and I started hearing a wet crunching noise and realized that it was eating this rabbit. It was squatted low on the ground, holding it with both of its hands, eating like you or I might eat a piece of chicken or drumstick or thigh with 2 hands. At this point, I guess it couldn't have been more than 40 yards from me. It's hard to remember details you didn't think about at the time many years later. I had on camouflage jacket and jeans, and I remember trying to make myself small while crouching in hopes that it would not notice me when it paused and sniffed as if smelling something. Then it raised its head up and sniffed again. It was at that moment I thought, shit, I hope it's not smelling my scent. At that moment it looked directly at me and emitted a low, guttural growl. I swear its eyes flashed a red, something that I have never seen an animal do without light reflecting into them. It was less bright than when a light reflected directly into an animal's eyes, but distinct enough. I could see the red eyes briefly flicker in the darkness. This didn't appear to be reflected light. It appeared to come from the creature itself for a split second and then disappear. Bizarre, I know. Looking directly at me, the creature stood up like it was challenging me and growled this low growl that I heard from 40 yards away or less. At that moment, I felt fear overwhelm me. I had this overwhelming urge to haul ass back to the house, but something inside, something told me not to run. That if I did, this thing would catch me and kill me. When I previously told you about all the times I felt hunted, and I felt a sense of unnatural terror, like my life was about to be forfeited in the most sudden, violent way. Well, now it was like I was looking at that source eye to eye. Somehow I knew that this creature was bad, far more powerful than me, and something like the inaudible voice kept telling me, don't run, don't forfeit your life, walk. Don't run, pray, stay calm. These thoughts kept going through my head, but they were not coming from my conscious mind. I slowly backed out of the field, never turning my back to this creature until briefly when I had to cross that electric fence. Even then, I tried not to turn my back completely to it and keep one eye on it. At this point, it had moved deeper into the shadows of the pasture and was moving parallel to my direction. I would occasionally hear it moving through the field, still staying parallel to me as I began to walk down the paved road toward my house. As I moved down the blacktop, I came to a section of woods with no homes or lights nearby. I had to walk through at least a few hundred yards of wooded road to get back to my house. And there was only one house on the way, no lights anywhere, nothing but woods. The thing tracked alongside me the whole way, moving through the woods in the darkness with absolute ease. Occasionally I would hear a branch crack or a swish of vegetation, and a few times it stopped to growl that low guttural growl at me. It's odd how I could hear it growl. I don't think I would have heard a dog growl at that distance. The entire time I felt this overwhelming sense of dread, fear, and inescapable death. I continued to listen to the internal voice and prayed hard that whole way. It kept telling me to walk, don't run, pray. I prayed. Oh, did I pray? I don't know if it was the voice or my intuition, but I somehow knew with absolute certainty that if I did run, this thing would have killed me. There was something symbolic about the act of fleeing from this evil, and I knew if I did, it was over. As I walked through the dark wooded stretch of road, I remember wondering if any of my remains would be found, and if so, what would they claim killed me? I kept feeling like I was going to be killed at any moment. Time was dragging. It seemed like forever until I got close to my house. I finally reached the driveway and even walked backward up the hill to the house because I did not, once again, want to turn my back on this creature. Sure enough, it was across the road from my house, growling from the edge of the tree line and brush. I finally bolted when I got about 10 yards from the door. I ran through the house, locking the doors and grabbing my old shotgun, even though I felt for certain the small game loads I had in it wouldn't do a thing but piss it off. I was too afraid to look out the windows, as I knew it was outside, and feared seeing it looking back at me through the window. The feeling this thing had given me was not just dangerous, it was evil, wicked, and unnatural. I sat in my room praying, if memory serves, until dawn broke. A few weeks later, maybe months, sorry, it's been a while, my little sister came downstairs sometime at around 1 a.m, white as a ghost. She was terrified. You could see it all over her. When I asked my family what was wrong, they told me she saw a bear crouched outside of her window. She had woken up to a terrifying feeling. She knew something was watching her sleep, and when she looked at the window next to her bed, she saw a bear with big red eyes staring at her. My sister slept in the bedroom on the second floor, but the garage adjoining that part of the house was a one-story. Something had climbed up the roof of the garage and had been intently watching her through the window. I asked her point blank if she was sure it was a bear. I could tell she was terrified and didn't want to acknowledge something. She responded with, "It was covered in fur, it had big red eyes and staring at me while I slept through my window." I was asleep when I woke up with a feeling of terror. I knew something was watching me. I felt like it was bad. I was generally too afraid to go back into the woods around my house after that, but when I did summon up that courage, I would periodically have to abruptly stop the hikes in the woods near the house. Everything would be fine, and then I would suddenly become overwhelmed with the ominous feeling that I was living on borrowed time, that creature was stalking me and it was about to get me. I almost always felt immediately, feeling like a shotgun in my hands that I was carrying was useless. On multiple occasions when this happened, I felt the inner voice again, telling me to leave now, walk, don't run, and pray. On a couple of occasions that I lingered momentarily to scan the woods for the creature, I never saw a thing, but it felt like it was growing closer and the danger grew more intense. It was around this time that I found someone's white domesticated rabbit hanging from a tree branch in the woods, disemboweled, and its eyes were plucked out. It was hanging from a branch maybe 5 feet off the ground. It struck me that it was like it was meant to be seen or found, as if it was placed in a highly visible location right behind someone's property line, at eye level, at the edge of the field beside the woods, where this thing seemed to frequent. It just seemed significant. It was about at that time that I learned the natives lived on a nearby adjacent property who were reputed to use blood magic. I was told this by another Native American who told me to stay away from them. We lived near a reservation, and multiple natives had told me about someone that is known as a shapeshifter, someone who had reportedly demonstrated their ability to shift into an animal, and they had ties to this family. The few times someone told me this, they always acted like it was taboo. I don't know if it's relevant, but it feels like it is all connected. A couple of years later, a friend of mine came to pick me up to take me to the nearby city. We pulled out of my driveway after midnight, and down the road from my house we saw a pair of huge wolves standing a few feet from the road, calmly watching us. Even staring at the car from a few feet away we passed, their presence and behavior seemed and felt very unnatural. And my friend, who had grown up there, freaked out. He became pale, sweaty, and started stuttering, telling me, "Those are wolves. Those are huge." The only wolves in Florida are a few red wolves, which almost look a lot like large coyotes. They have reddish-brown coloring and are very small for a wolf. These individuals were silver and gray and black, and I guess they looked to weigh about 140 to 180 pounds. One was smaller than the other, and when I looked at them I instinctively knew they were a pair, a male and a female. Red wolves aren't present anywhere near this part of Florida Panhandle, and this was something entirely different. I questioned my uncle, a state biologist and a huge outdoorsman, and he told me that there are very few red wolves in Florida. They were nowhere near the size of what I had seen that night. Similarly, there are none with red eyes that sit on roofs and peer through little girls' windows. I don't know the true nature of what I experienced was, but it always left me with a sense that it had a very strong supernatural element. Yeah, these things had physical forms, but there was something more, something supernatural. My friend knew something, but he was so terrified that all he would tell me is that there are natives in the area and that part of the woods was special to them. And then he would get even more terrified look, clam up, and change the subject. He used to have a house in the immediate area, he said. Strange things happened there. Was something bad around that house, something in those woods. He said that their house mysteriously burnt down one day when no one was home. They had rebuilt it, and it caught fire and burned down a second time when no one was home. whatever happened spooked him so much that they bought a new home many miles away, and he was spooked to even think about it. When locals told me of the natives who were reportedly shifters, I began researching and learned that many tribes have beliefs of dark magic that would allow them to transform into something like a skinwalker from Navajo lore. These rituals are always dark rituals that involve blood, sacrifice, and some other dark or evil deeds. After that, I just stayed completely out of the woods around the house and didn't walk further than the barn during the night. There were several incidents, more loud, piercing screams at night. Once or twice, I heard that baby thing that was crying in the woods in the middle of the night. As I thought to myself, that's no baby. Something's trying to lure me out there and screw with me. The sound changed from a very distinct sound of a baby into something wicked, unnatural, almost evil, a twisted mockery of the sound of a baby crying. I felt it was literally trying to mess with me, trying to install terror and let me know that it was there. One time, I had to talk to my brother and a friend about going out into the woods to look for the baby. And again, as soon as everyone agreed that there could not possibly be a baby crying in the woods in the middle of the night, the sound changed into something so wicked which would curdle your blood. There was also another occasion we heard puppies crying out in a ditch at the edge of the woods in the middle of the night. Once again, a couple of the friends wanted to rush out there to rescue the puppies. And once again, as soon as I pointed out that it couldn't possibly be puppies in the woods in the middle of the night, the sound changed again. Almost like something evil is trying to create the most disturbing sounds. Shortly after this, I moved away and rarely visited home. After all of my encounters, years later, my family sold the house. All right, so what a crazy experience that man had, or experiences. And it took him years to finally be able to share that. I know that the person took a long time recording it all and then putting it together to be able to share, feeling comfortable enough to be able to share it all. One thing that I noticed is how he talked about the sounds that these creatures were making. And I wanted to talk about a couple things that go along with a crazy email that I received yesterday. A woman emails me saying, "You're a Dogman and Paranormal channel. You shouldn't be talking about things like giants and angels and UFOs and deep underground military bases." And I said, I responded to her, one, it is my channel. I will talk about Muppets if I want. Two, it is all connected. And if you don't think or believe that, you may want to step back and re-examine where you think these things may have come from. There is years of research saying that these things, the military, the government, have connections to these creatures, and it struck me as odd. But so this guy mentions the experience that I just shared. He mentions once hearing sounds of a woman screaming bloody murder, which we've all heard those claims. But then a baby crying out in the woods, and that is not anything new. Going into D.U.M.B.S, they talk about level 6 Nightmare Hall, where, it's privately called Nightmare Hall. There are multi-armed, multi-legged human-like creatures, humanoid bat-like creatures, creatures that are bipedal, hairy, with clawed-like hands. They don't talk about what the face look like, and I find that interesting. But that can mimic a baby. So, did these things escape during the War of Dulce, or were they pushed out to mess with humanity? Either or is really scary to think about. But the thing that his brother saw, it was walking quadruped, and they saw the ass end of this creature, too big to be a dog. But there are no bear in that area of in Florida, in the Panhandle where he lives. And that only got me thinking, it has no tail. So it's either a Bigfoot, what we call on this channel a werewolf, or something that was described by Tom Castiello, Phil Snyder, and others talking about Dulce. And then I got thinking a little bit more about that, and they talk a little bit about this. I find this interesting. As for the giants, some believe that these have a direct connection to a 10 to 12 foot Anakim people mentioned in the Old Testament, who were driven out of Palestine, following which the Torah gives no further details as to their fate, although there have been many reports of such giants being encountered in large cavernous systems below Alaska, Oregon, California, Utah, Texas, and Mexico, and also reports of ancient grave sites in western United States and elsewhere, where human giants have been reportedly discovered. Some, or most often they, like the fifth dimensional Sasquatch people themselves, have been described as being benevolent unless provoked. Around Dulce and these subterranean bases, there are probably inner earth drones or workers. The deeper you get, the stranger the life. Tall men are from subterranean levels. Lower yet are the dwarfed, deformed forms. I don't trust either or. There are other forms that both the tall men and dwarf men fear and loathe. They are similar to a Bigfoot in appearance, but extremely violent and enjoy eating whatever they find while still alive. They are subhuman and demented with an IQ of around 15. Are that feral people? To me, that sounds like a feral human. They're talking how Bigfoot or Sasquatch-like creatures don't even want to be around these kind of deformed human-like creatures that eat whatever they catch, humans, animals, alive. No. According to other sources, these lower level Bigfoot type creatures having more of a resemblance to apes than to a more human-like face, and features of much friendlier Sasquatch people who frequent the surface, dwell in wild cavern systems, some 6 or more miles deep, along with other very large and dangerous insect and quadruped or serpentine reptilian forms. Something right out of the Hadean nightmare. This is according to a report investigated some years ago of a group of spelunkers who reportedly broke into a vast underground labyrinth west of Arkansas, where they encountered these types, as well as a friendly blue-skinned human claiming to be descendants from a family that survived an ancient global deluge by taking refuge within a large ship. These ancient people claimed that their ancestors had come to the Americas and discovered the cavernous world wherein they commenced to establish their hidden civilization. I find that very interesting. What large ship? Are they talking about the Ark? Noah's Ark? Probably. It's all biblical. Like I said in the beginning of a couple of years ago, I didn't even want to think on a biblical level. I never ever thought that cryptids were even. It honestly used to make me mad. But when I turned my life over to Jesus Christ, our Savior, I then realized that, yes, it is all connected. And like I said the other day, reading Gnostic information about this stuff and giants and Egyptian text and all that is not blasphemous. Because why is it not blasphemous, you might say? Well, because Jesus wants us to be informed. He wants us to learn. That's why he gave us this great, organic machine up here, this organic computer, is so we could learn about this stuff and be ready for whatever's going to happen next. All right. So the next thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was this, which I found very, very interesting. The helicopter bit. Mystery choppers. This is from Bill Cooper's alter ego, Commander X. Do I have that book down here? I don't have his books down here. I have them upstairs. But Commander X Bill Cooper wrote a bunch of books under a pseudonym called Commander X. And this is a little bit about what he talks about these mysterious black helicopters. Situations involving the mysterious helicopters appear to be little more insidious. A good example is an event that occurred in Madison County, Montana between June and October of 1976. 22 confirmed cattle mutilations had occurred during that period, and they were accompanied by reports throughout the county seat with unmarked jet black helicopters flashing or steady ominous lights in the air and near the ground, unmarked fixed-winged aircraft, and white vans in remote and previous inaccessible areas. Toward the latter part of this period, in the early autumn of 76, a hunter in Bozeman, Montana, was out alone at 3 p.m. one day in the Red Mountain area near Norris. He watched as a black helicopter without markings flew overhead and disappeared below a small hill. The curious hunter climbed to the top of the hill. There was the black helicopter on the ground, engine still running. 7 men had apparently exited the craft and were walking up the hill toward the observer. As the hunter advanced toward the 7, he waved and shouted to them. It was then that he realized something about the men. They were Oriental. They had olive-like skin and Oriental-like eyes and were jabbering among themselves in a strange language. They wore everyday clothing, not uniforms. Suddenly, they began to return to the helicopter. The hunter, still waving and shouting friendly greetings, started after them. These men quickened their pace. When the hunter approached within 5 or 6 feet, they broke into a dead run, crowded into the copter, and took off. In a documented mystery helicopter, Wave in England, accounts place Oriental-appearing occupants in an unidentified copter. Once again, Oriental-like eyes with olive skin. Oriental-seeming occupants have been a staple at the heart and at the periphery of UFO accounts. Significant numbers of infamous men in black have a similar appearance, but very often they are seen as very pale and gaunt men who are sensitive to the light. In stigmata number 5, winter/fall of 78, Tom Adams outlined the most prominent speculative explanation according to the mutilation helicopter link included the fouling. This is just a theory that this one man had. The helicopters are themselves UFOs, disguised to appear as terrestrial craft. The helicopters originate from within the United States government/military and are directly involved in conducting actual mutilations. The helicopters are government, military, and are not involved in the mutilations but investigating them. The helicopters are government or military, and they know about the identity and motives of the mutilators, and by their presence, they are trying to divert attention to the possibility of involvement by the military. The answer, was far as Tom Adams concerned, could be a combination of all of the above. There also had been speculation that they were involved in biological experiments with chemical or biological warfare, or the geobotanical pursuit of petroleum and mineral deposits. On one occasion, an Army standard type scalpel was found at a mutilation site. Since the discs have been mostly involved in mutilations, it is thought that this was a diversionary event. So they find this military issued scalpel from the military physicians and such, and think, well, in 76, and strangely enough, I think that was the thing that me and my dad had watched a show about, was during that time period. Not me watching a show during 76, but the show in the 80s being about that time period. So what happened is the Army or the military or government came in, landed quick, put a blade close to the carcass and out of there, because they didn't want anyone to know about the mutilations yet. And if they did find out, oh, it was the Army. Why would they blame the Army? That's not going to work. That's not going to fly with the civilian world. We're going to ask questions. These events, or the discussion of them, is just a precursor to the actual revelations of what is behind the mutilations. Alien acquisition of biological materials for their own use. To discuss this in logical and a sequential manner, we must review what has been really going on right under our noses. Direct interaction with extraterrestrial biological entities, EBEs. To discuss that, however, we must attempt to start at the beginning with what we know to be true. So, a little bit of information on the helicopters. It's what I could find out. I kind of like what they said about it. I think it's pretty cool. Last bit of information. Actually, I'll save this for another day. This is a very interesting all right, actually I'll share it quickly. Who on earth built these underground bases? Obviously these bases just didn't suddenly appear. Someone had to build them, but who? It would have been a corporation that is familiar with large projects and unusual engineering problems. And of course, it would be assisted by corporate America. In '59, there was a RAND symposium which covered advances in underground tunneling technology. Over 60 or 650 attendees came. Such companies were GE, AT&T, Hughes Aircraft, Northrop Corp, Sandia Corp, Stanford Research Institute, Welsh Construction Company, Colorado School of Mines, the Bechtel Corporation, one of the major underground construction companies, were present. Bechtel is super secret international corporate octopus, founded in 1896. Some say the firm is really a shadow government, which became a working arm of the CIA. It is the largest construction and engineering outfit in the world. Some say even beyond. And now tonight's final encounter. When I was a kid, maybe 8 or so, my brother and our parents traveled to Mississippi, or from Mississippi to California. My aunt and uncle came as well. Us in a car and them in the RV. We stopped somewhere in west central Texas for the night. We all slept in the RV. Sometime in the middle of the night, everyone was asleep, and I awoke, feeling strange. I sat up looking out the window and saw, I really don't know what I saw, what appeared to be men walking on 2 feet. But they had fur and looked very similar to wolves. As a late teen, I lived in Lincoln County, Mississippi, and went to a friend's house for the weekend, who lived way out of town down a gravel road with 2 houses and an old still that belonged to my friend's family. So, of course, around midnight, we snuck out and walked to the still about a half a mile away. Now, we were scared we'd get caught, so we did not stay long at all. Definitely not long enough for alcohol to cloud our judgment. On the way back, we got maybe 20 yards from the driveway. One side of the road was heavily wooded, the other had scattered trees and brush. We heard something moving in the brush, almost simultaneously stopping, and turned in the direction. Next was a growl that scared me worse than I'd ever been scared before, and haven't felt like that since then. We both took off running, not daring to look back because we could hear it. We made it inside and never said a word to each other until the next day. We just sat staring at each other. My brother-in-law and his wife live next door to us. There's probably 200 yards between the house and a slim wood line that was cleared, a small trail through to go back and forth. At the time my son was 10, he and I rode over there on a four-wheeler for something and returned home shortly after. I pulled into the carport at the back end of the house, and my son hopped off the ATV first. He said, "Mom, what is that?" pointing toward the wood line we had just come from. When I turned, there was something very tall with fur covering its body walking in the wood line. It moved kind of slow and smooth. I remember thinking it looked almost like it was floating. It moved so smoothly, but it was walking. I could clearly see that. We got my brother-in-law to all drive us back out to that part of the property, and found nothing. This one didn't scare me as much as the others. It amazed me more because I was like, it knew, or I knew it. Not many believed me, but I will still share this. Thank you. And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting this channel. It is, after all, your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.